Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to your Wednesday night live stream, the Hump Day edition. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis, pleased to be joined by fellow Lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel and the newest member of the On Texas family, my friend and co-worker. It's the one and only Jeff Howell joining us as well. You guys know how it works. You guys throw out as many questions and comments as you please. We'll try to address as many of them as we can. Super chats jump to the front of the line. You can interrupt the show at any time, but there is a ton to discuss, of course. We'll talk about spring football practice, which has already started. We'll get into, CJ and Jeff were both there for that media window. We'll get into what they saw. We'll also get into discussions about Pro Day, which transpired yesterday, and talk about the Longhorn to increase their draft stock, help themselves the most. So we'll talk about Pro Day as well. And we'll get into some other news, actually, that my man Bobby Burton broke earlier today about the Texas football roster, member of that, or former member of that Texas football team. We'll get into that too coming up. But first, let me get you guys' thoughts. Let's dive right into it. I want to get you guys are both there at Pro Day. And, it's something that, obviously we all got a chance to witness. I think most of the guys there performed pretty well. I don't think there were many disappointing performances. CJ, I'll throw it to you first. Who is your winner of the Pro Day, if there was a winner of the Pro Day?
I think the big winner for me was Jaden Blue, just coming out, and proving to all these scouts, coaches, and execs that were in attendance that the 4-2 talks weren't just talks, right? He was able to get out there and showcase that, hey, 4.25, 4.28, that's what all the scouts were going home with. And, of course, backing that up, saying that there was some sort of groin injury, whether it be a strain or a tear, and still run a 4.38. I don't think you can dispute the speed. Now, you can go into the tape, talk about what kind of running back he is. Of course, that's what these guys do, but the speed is going to be something that separates him, and it's almost a shame that he didn't get to run that, out of the combine and be one of these big winners. But yeah, I thought he was one of the guys that I came away saying, yeah, that was a good showing for him. And I think he needed that, right? In front of all these scouts 1 month away from the NFL draft.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Jeff, I know Jaden Blue seems like the obvious one. You got another big winner of the Texas Pro Day yesterday?
I'll go Gavin Holmes and Silas Bolden. Both.
I like those. I like
helping their stock. I think both are probably in a priority free agent mix. You hear some interesting conversations when you're at Pro Day and after, because Mike Vrabel went outside while Silas Bolden was catching punts at one point. He was one of the 6 head coaches there. And I heard one of Silas Bolden's reps tell him, when Silas was done with media, say, hey, the Patriots are really interested. Well, last time I heard that at a Texas Pro Day was regarding Brendan Schooler, who's now an all-pro special teamer with the Patriots. So it was a pretty good day for Silas Bolden. He's small, but, you watch him play. We go back to, camp last year. And it was like, man, I think people are going to love Silas Bolden. Like, you just do that day one, like just watching him just run around in a helmet and a jersey top and shorts. So I think he's definitely worth getting into a camp. I'll put it this way. I could see Silas Bolden. Now I know this will excite CJ. I could see Silas Bolden making people a lot of money if you're playing preseason daily fantasy this August. I can see Silas Bolden making people a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I like that, Gavin. I like those, like Gavin Holmes, because I said that when I was watching Pro Day. I was like, man, Gavin Holmes looks good. Whether it's on the 40 or the vertical. And like I said, I've always loved his tape. He didn't get a lot of reps, but, man, he was solid when he was tested in coverage. So he's got some good, not a lot of small sample size. Now, so not a lot of film at Texas, but he's actually got some pretty good film, too. I think he'll force some scouts to go back to the film. And like you said, man, maybe a priority undrafted free agent. It's a hard way to make it, but I like Gavin Holmes' game. I definitely liked his workout. So his play against OU was special. Gavin Holmes got a few good plays. He's talking about Silas Bolden, I'm assuming. Silas Bolden play against. But Silas Bolden, this is my thing about Silas Bolden. I think he'd be willing to do anything and to play any role on the team, and that'll help him. Because if if he's a wide receiver, he's also going to end up being the punt returner. If he's the main punt returner, he'll be a backup wide receiver. He'd be a guy that'll play special teams, be a gunner for you if you need that. He's a guy that'll play, a cover and kick. I don't even know if he's big enough to do that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I mean, I guarantee you he'll do anything to get into a camp. So,
you know what else, Rod, about Silas? He's also going to be the answer to a trivia question. Who was on the receiving end of Arch Manning's first touchdown as a Longhorn? Silas Bolden against Colorado State.
Yeah, it was that weird broken play, right?
Yep.
Little shove, like the little pitch to him. Yeah, improvising. That was a nice play.
Mm-hmm.
Showed you how comfortable Arch is, off script, off schedule. All right, good stuff there. Yeah, I was gonna go. I'll throw in Bond since you guys went blue and Gavin Holmes. I agree with all those, by the way. Gavin Holmes, and also just kind of looking at Silas Bolden, what he did. I think that, Isaiah Bond helped himself a lot. Speaking of, as a matter of fact, I was looking at NFL.com and I sent this to Matthew. Bucky Brooks was doing his top 5 overall wide receivers coming out, and post pro day, he's got Isaiah Bond at number 5. Got Matthew Golden at 2. So I don't know who. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's gonna. I don't know if he's gonna end up being the 5th wide receiver drafted in this draft, but he may be after the top 3 Longhorns drafted, after Barron, after Kelvin Banks, Matthew Golden. Those going to be the top 3. We know how that goes. Mm-hmm. Bond might be trending toward being the kind of next one after that.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think who else is going. Quinn obviously is in that conversation too. But
I would say Cam Williams, but I don't. Cam said he's about 2 weeks away from working out for teams. If he can show somebody something, maybe in these last minute workouts, then maybe he gets in there. But I just think there's just too much time that's passed in the draft process for him to be, kind of that early second round range. I think it's more kind of later in the second round at this point for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't have him firmly in the second round either. But after that time, maybe people like him. Sorry, CJ, go ahead.
I was going to say it'll be interesting if Texas has what they did last year, that second pro day. Jordan Whittington was a guy that wasn't able to participate in the combine, wasn't able to participate in the pro day, but they had like a second pro day in Austin. I think Jalen Ford also did some work in that day as well. But for a guy like Cam Williams, Alfred Collins, who I'm sure would like to improve some of those testing numbers, specifically in the jumps, Gunnar Helm to get a 40 out there. I mean, it would make sense if they had something like April 7th or, April 10th, just 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, try to get these guys a little bit more health in them before they go out and participate once more. So I think that would be a smart move. But at the end of the day, talking about these wide receivers, again, the one thing with Bond, he's the fastest wide receiver in this draft, and I don't think you can dispute it. Yes, Matthew Golden ran 4.29, but that top-end speed is something that I think a lot of NFL teams look for and value, and you're starting to see these more analytical approaches, right? The 40-yard dash for offensive linemen never meant anything until you saw the 10-yard splits. Well, now that these next-gen stats and everything else kind of showcase the explosivity and how much – or how quickly these guys can get to top end speed. I think for Bond, that's one of the big reasons why there is buzz of him in the top 5, because he certainly didn't have that type of season, but he contains that level of athleticism and raw traits that, I think a team with a number 1 receiver already can take and say, all right, I think we can build this into a pretty solid number 2 or number 3 if need be.
That's a good point, though. The latest, kind of in vogue analytical metric is the MPHs, the miles per hour, that max speed. It's probably happened the last maybe 4 or 5 years. They've been throwing it up there, but this year, I mean, it was more than that. It was prevalent more than ever with every guy in the ranking with the guys in the miles per hour. So there's no doubt about that, CJ. You're right, and that did help him because I believe he was right behind the last 2 years, right behind Xavier Worthy. They were both at like 24 miles per hour. He was the second fastest at this combine, but I believe in terms of wide receivers, in the last 2 years, he was right there behind. I think X-Man was 24.4 in miles per hour, and I think he was like 24.1 or something crazy like that. Either way, you're talking about some world-class speed.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to this super chat here. Thank you, Lock In Horns. Thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. Said, evening, boys. He said, how long does the Michael Terry wide receiver audition last before we know if that's his spot? And if not, where would he best fit? Thank you very much, Lock In Horns. I'm assuming that's Michael Terry, of course. So, yeah, guys, I mean, I don't think it's a tryout. I think that's if he is going to grasp different positions. And by the way, the wide receiver position at Texas is mastering the wide receiver position at Texas is no small feat because Sark wants you to learn all of the different wide receiver positions. All right. So they're interchangeable. So that in itself takes really high football IQ, takes some maturity. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have it, but it may take a while. Everybody learns at a different pace. And then think about putting him at another position so that he can also learn that one. And then try to master multiple positions. So hopefully, in my opinion, he can be a movable chess piece. And I don't know if that's what you want, Lock In, but that's what I want. I don't want him to learn just one position and stay there. I like him to be able to master multiple positions. I don't know if that's in the plans, though, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while. And I say that because, look, you have a lot of opportunity at wide receiver right now. It's just Ryan Wingo and then it's just Parker Livingstone that you feel comfortable with, right? If Michael Terry can come out and show that he's ready to rock and roll from the jump at wide receiver, Texas is going to need him. They're going to say, to hell with tight end, to hell with running back. We don't have anybody else right now at this wide receiver spot, right? You know, the only guy that's healthy with a catch at wide receiver is Ryan Wingo. So it'll be interesting. Of course, I still think Texas will go get somebody out of the portal. If that's the case, I think that circle of trust, if you will, that quote-unquote group that Sark and Chris Jackson deploy would grow to 4, with Parker Livingstone being the 4th. Obviously, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Wingo, portal. But can Michael Terry scratch that group the same way that we're seeing maybe a Jamie French or maybe an Aaron Butler or maybe a Dalen McCutcheon and Khalid Clockett? We'll see. But look, Michael Terry looked pretty darn good running routes on Tuesday. But let's see what these practices in the spring do before saying, hey, the Swiss Army knife, we need him to learn and master all 3 or 4 other positions on the field when one might get him on the field pretty darn quick.
And wide receiver, even though there's a lot of bodies in the room, it's his easiest path to the field. I mean, I don't think you want to put him in there at running back and let him compete there right now. Physically, I don't know if he's ready to compete at tight end. And give him a chance to play receiver. Look, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and next spring you change his position, but then he's already spent a year learning wide receiver. So you're just adding to the arsenal. I just give him something that he can figure out right now where he can learn and get comfortable. And if it's receiver, great. Like I said, I think that's probably his best path to the field right now. Now, could we be looking at next spring after he goes through another winter and he's, 240, 245 pounds and you have to, move him to a tight end or an H-back? Maybe. But I think if you're Sark and you're the offensive staff, like, worry about that when you get there. Like, just, he is what he is right now. Try to let him learn wide receiver and then, build it out from there. At the very, wherever he'd be, guys, he'd have to learn one position. There'd be one position where he's got to settle in and learn it before you can have him do anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. And wide receiver is not the easiest necessarily, but I do think they're the most natural to learn quickly and master that. But I do want to see him as a movable chess piece at one point in his career. Maybe this first year, though, like CJ mentioned, maybe wide receiver is the test this year. You can see the field at wide receiver this year, then see if you can add a little bit more onto his plate.
Yeah.
But,
absolutely.
All right.
At least after the spring.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. That's realistic. All right, can't turn him into Deebo Samuel overnight. All right, let's jump. Let's thank one of our sponsors before we dive into some more questions here. Let's thank Bluebird Organizing. Friends over at bluebirdorganizing.net. We appreciate them for sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream. Is your wife actually feeling a little bit overwhelmed? Maybe does she consistently mention how she's wishes there was, obviously a little bit more room, a little bit more space, or she wants to park a car in the garage, but there's obviously too much junk in there, or maybe she complains about tripping over all the kids' toys. Are you, as a husband, feeling a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit lost these days with spring cleaning well on its way? Mother's Day just around the corner. Give your wife the gift of a lifetime with a customized organizing session from Bluebird Organizing. That's right. Perry, owner of Bluebird Organizing, will come into your space without judgment at all and give your wife the organized kitchen, closet, playroom, and or garage of her dreams. Plus, Perry will take all donations for you at the end, leaving you and your family ready to enjoy the new space. It's time to give your wife a gift she'll love for years to come. Just call her or give her a text, 737-346-7779. That's 737-346-7779 to book your free in-person consultation, which means you got nothing to lose but everything to gain. And actually, you can change your life for the better with our friends at Bluebird Organizing, bluebirdorganizing.net. That's bluebirdorganizing.net. Thank you very much to Bluebird Organizing for being a gracious sponsor of On Texas Football. All right, getting back to the questions here. Let's start at the top. How about this one from Kyle? It says, Jeff and CJ, would it be a disappointment if Texas didn't sweep Missouri this weekend?
I'm going to say no. CJ probably has a different take than I do. But, man, look, getting a road sweep in the SEC is not easy. So it would be a disappointment if they didn't win the series.
Yes.
But, man, I've seen baseball just one of those, as the late great Augie Garrido said, it's a cruel game. So I'm not leaving anything to chance. I'd say definitely a series win. I'd be disappointed, but I'm not going to go as far as to say I'd be disappointed if they didn't sweep.
Yeah, I don't know. Missouri's not a good baseball team. Texas has been rolling, obviously. You'd like to see that momentum continue, and it obviously didn't look like Texas had too much of an LSU hangover after the series win last week on Tuesday. But, hey, Missouri, 9-14 on the season, 1-5 so far in SEC play. I would say the expectation is to leave with 3 wins under your belt. But obviously, to your point, Jeff, baseball's a tough game, right? You never know which way a ball might trickle, which way the wind might blow, or if there's rain coming in, and that's the expectation again. Whether or not Texas and Missouri play a doubleheader, we'll see. But I would say the expectation is to come away with all 3. But you'll never be upset or never, kind of hang your head by winning a series on the road in SEC play.
Now, winning the LSU series gave you a little bit of margin for error to play with, though. If we're talking about finishing – bet 500 or better in the conference. That was a series I didn't think Texas would win, quite honestly. So, not that Schloss would ever be cool with dropping a game, but if you dropped one to Missouri, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that through 2 weeks of conference play, Missouri's got more conference wins than A&M, meaning they've got 1, and the Aggies are 0-6 in the conference.
Crazy.
That's unreal, man.
Did Missouri play for the national championship last year?
You go from national runner-up and preseason number 1 to butt naked last in the conference before you get to April. That's harsh, man.
Life comes at you fast, man. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Kyle, for the question. How about this one? Man, CB, appreciate CB. Always good to see you. Says Jeff, prior to Jonah Williams taking an at bat at Texas in Texas baseball game, was Shea Marin's the last Longhorn to accomplish that?
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly hard, man. To be a 2-sport athlete, period. But to do, I mean, Rod, our good friend Johnny Walker, Johnny did it for a little bit, and he talked about just how insanely difficult it was. Even back then, I think now it's. And I've said this about Jonah Williams too. I think the good thing with him doing this is while he's recovering from the clavicle injury, he wouldn't be able to do much in spring ball anyway. He'd probably be with the medical staff working on rehab and getting that thing right. So let him get his feet wet with baseball just so he can kind of be an observer and see, all right, next year in theory, when you're healthy enough to do both, what would the time commitments be? So I think at some point he's going to have to pick one or the other. Yeah. But right now, I think this is from that standpoint, the clavicle injury was a blessing in disguise because at least it lets him see, all right, from my time commitments, like, can I physically do both? And I don't know, CJ. I'm not saying that's not a knock on Jonah Williams at all because I know he's a special athlete, but man, it is insanely difficult to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And given what he decided out of high school when the MLB draft was right there, I have to assume that football would be the pick, right? And I think there's part of him that, kind of misses that back end of his senior season and is just kind of itching to get back out on the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw an answer before football even began, right? You see how this spring session goes. You see how everybody on the early enrollee camp is participating and performing on the fields at Dennis. I have nothing of concrete, sourcing here, but it wouldn't surprise me if you hear something by the end of July saying, all right, football is going to be the decision moving forward. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, CB. Appreciate the question. How about this one from Brendan? Says, does Lance Jackson get some real reps in game next year? Kid's going to be a problem. Him and Justice Terry are my picks to be early impacts on defense first. Thank you for the question, Brendan. I will say, I saw Lance Jackson walking past me at the pro day. That's crazy that dude is a freshman. That doesn't, and early enrollee is at that. That's a grown man. That's a grown man.
It's gonna be interesting. That spot opposite of Colin Simmons. Does Texas move a Trey Moore full time to linebacker because he got some time there, practice one of the spring? Is he a situational piece back there? If that's the case, who takes that spot where he previously was? Is that full-time Ethan Burke? Is it Colton Vosick? How does Zena figure in? There's a lot of talented bodies up there that are already older than Lance. And, of course, you got to also picture in Justice Terry to this conversation as well. But I have to imagine a guy with Lance's physical prowess, right? Right, you talked about it, the height, the weight, the stature, the arm length, right? Not to mention the athleticism and bend as a guy that threw 94 on the mound last year. I see the path to the field, but how much of that is because of Texas beating teams pretty heavily? And I think and I hope that's the case. So you can get all these guys some extra snaps for the time that when the playoffs do come and games 14, 15, 16 are underway for the Longhorns, they're not ready, or they are ready, and not necessarily completely wide-eyed at stepping onto the field saying, oh, we're at the Cotton Bowl or Rose Bowl. We got to perform at a different level. No, they'll be ready for that by then.
I guess my I would have a follow-up to Brendan, and we appreciate the question. I guess define real reps. Because I'm kind of with CJ. I think Sark is going to use the 3 non-conference games after Ohio State. In other words, I wouldn't feel good about taking Texas to cover in some of those games, guys, because I think once the game gets to a point, I don't think Sark is going to give a damn about the spread. I think he's going to be looking to get guys snaps at some point. In other words, get the game to where you feel comfortable and then start getting some guys in. So I guess if you're expecting him, is Lance Jackson going to go play 20 snaps in Columbus? Probably not. But is he going to be working to the point where by the time you get to the Florida game, once non-con's over, you get the bye week and then you get Florida, can he go to Gainesville and give you 10 snaps, 8 snaps? Yeah, I think you can. And anytime you're talking about a road SEC game, I don't care who you're playing, man. Those are high leverage snaps. Y'all like how I've become an SEC homer all of a sudden? Like for years, I've just been saying that the league doesn't matter. All it takes is one go through in this thing, Rod, and you're like, dude, it is a freaking grinder every single week. But yeah, I think I've said this about CJ Baxter, and I think I'll say this about some of those freshmen that we expect to be big time contributors. Now that line of demarcation is going to be that Florida game. If you see guys playing snaps, non-special team snaps in Gainesville, those are going to be the guys that Sark is they're going to be wanting to count on once you get later into the season and hopefully, Lord willing, get into the CFP.
Yeah, no, Sark said, you're right, Jeff. He said, I'm going to play. I wish I'd have played more guys in those early games. We should have played more of those young guys. So Lance Jackson, he looks like a Marvel character. So it won't take him long to see the field. And Justice Terry, I think Justice Terry should be on the NASCAR package. I think he should be I don't know if they just bump him inside. He should be one that guy. I think he can be kind of what the role that Colin Simmons had on the NASCAR package, where that's how they really eased him in. Jeff's a fine bomb homer now.
Thank you, Zane. I appreciate that.
But that's how you ease him in, because that's an easy package to be in. It's just it's a predictable pass situation. It usually is third and long, and you can just let him go get quarterback, and then he can start to wet his kind of get his feet wet a little bit there, and then I think later on put him on down some early downs in critical moments. But I agree with you. I do think Justice Terry's the guy that sees the field early, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And everybody
about sorry, Rod, I didn't mean to cut you off. First off, Rod's been on Feinbaum, so the collective IQ of that listening audience and the guest list was elevated significantly by Rod's presence on Feinbaum. So let's give Paul and his crew a little bit of credit.
Hey,
second of all, look, I just, when I think of Texas defense and I think of, okay, how do you bring guys along properly? I always go back to, what did Will Muschamp do? How did Will Muschamp figure it out? And you think back, Rod, even guys early in their careers, they might not have played a lot, but like he found a way to get Jackson Jeffcoat on the field as a freshman. He found a way to get Alex Okafor or Sam Acho or Lamar Houston. He found a way to get those guys on the field. So I don't think there's any question. Even though you're deep, and that's the thing with Lance Jackson, like there have been some years where you're like, yeah, he's going to play a lot. Okay, but to CJ's point, when you start talking about the depth chart and you start looking at it, okay, if you're putting him on the field, you got to take somebody off. So whose snaps are you taking away to give him snaps? You going to take away Trey Moore snaps? You going to take away some of Ethan Burke's snaps? Are you situationally going to take away snaps from one of the interior guys? So this is a great problem to have. Don't get me wrong. It's first world problems we're talking about. Crying from a yacht, as Sark would say. But yeah, and that's the other question you got to ask yourself. All right, if player X, if you want to get him on the field, cool. Who's coming off? And in what situation is it? Yeah.
No, that's a good point. That's why I think Justice Terry, because there are some reps to be had in that interior D line potentially. Can find his way on situationally in the spots. But yeah, on the edge, places like that, Lance Jackson, different conversation, because I don't know if there's a deeper edge room in the country. I mean, you're in that conversation for Texas. I'm sure there's somebody, a few, but Texas definitely in the top 5, maybe in the top 3, and it may be the deepest once we start doing our offseason research. All right, thank you, Brendan, for that. We appreciate it. How about this? Let's get to this story, because I think some of the questions actually do relate to the report earlier today. Shout out to Bobby Burton, who I believe was the one who first reported it. But there is a member of the Texas team, that says here, there's a Texas receiver who is right here, no longer with the team, Freddie DeBose, no longer with the team. That was reported by Bobby earlier today. And now, shout out to my man CB here, says 8 scholarship receivers now left after DeBose's departure. So I don't obviously know any details that you guys may know, but what do you do roster wise in terms of roster construction? Where does this leave you now that you lost one of your receivers?
It leaves you with a lot of questions right now. Again, with Freddie DeBose, I don't know if he was going to be a player for Texas this year, but hey, it's another body that was in this room, in this system before. Again, I don't know actually how much he was actually on the field last year as he rehabbed from his knee. But that wide receiver room, it still needs a body or two. And that's kind of where I sit right now is, look, Texas, and there's a comment earlier by Kenneth. Texas has 81 scholarships right now. We put that up on Texas Football earlier today. Look, if you have 4 scholarships, I would throw one at tight end. I would throw one at defensive line again, and I'd maybe spend 2 at wide receiver. And I'd go get one guy, and we've talked about it, a guy that's in that round 2, round 3, round 4 conversation, right? I don't think a guy in the first round is going to be available for you. And then I'd go get a Silas Bolden type of guy, maybe someone that's played at a lower level, played, some lesser competition, but has a great amount of experience and snaps on the field with production that follows, I think that's where I would go for Texas. Because again, it's one thing to have a lot of talent in the room. It's another thing to have a guy like Matthew Golden, who had 900 career receiving yards coming in, a guy like Isaiah Bond, who had a 4th and 31 against the biggest rival on the biggest stage to win the game, right? You know, it's little things like that add up. And right now, Texas doesn't have that in the room at all. So, yeah, DeBose, I don't know if he was actually going to be a part of this rotation or not. It's unfortunate that he's no longer with the program, but it doesn't change the fact that this room needs an elder statesman and or two, and we'll see where they go when the portal opens up in about 30 days.
Yeah, I'm with CJ from the standpoint that I would ideally, you'd like to get a wide receiver who does have some punt return ability. Because I think you've got enough guys, Rod, with some straight line speed that you can find some kickoff returns. And we like in the college game, the kickoff return is still not a huge part of the college game to begin with.
Yeah.
But I think you've got enough guys. I mean, Parker Livingstone, I think, could be a guy. That kickoff returns is where you could use Aaron Butler's speed. That's where his speed could be an asset, is on kickoff returns, not on punt returns. I would try to find a wide receiver, a top 2 wide receiver with some punt return ability. And I know it's all going to depend on what the spring portal window gives you, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I would prioritize first. Second, I would prioritize an interior defensive lineman, particularly someone who's more of a disruptor than kind of a run fitter, if you will, a run stuffer. After that, I would look tight end next. And tight end's one where I don't think you need to, you don't need to try to find, Brock Bowers in the portal, right? You don't need to do that. I think you just really need a bigger body who can be an inline blocker, because that's an insurance policy. Because if something happens to Spencer Shannon, what are you going to do for your inline blocking tight end? Because he's the one you've got on the roster right now.
Yeah.
That is as important as tight end is to Sark. I got to have at best somebody that can compete with him and push him. Now, at worst, I got to have an insurance policy.
Yeah.
And then after that, I still, it's going to depend on what we see from like Cade Phillips and some of the young guys. I would reserve that last one for best player available. And I may go corner. Or if there's another receiver that's there, go get a receiver. But corner, I'm not going to completely write off getting a corner in the portal.
Yeah,
I've heard you mention it. Yeah.
This would have been the perfect year for Silas Bolden, right?
Yep.
A wide open receiving room. He would have absolutely have been the punt returner again. And Jeff, I don't know if you saw it on Tuesday, but the group of punt returners that Texas threw out there, that was an ugly display of punt catching.
I got your text. I got your text from the other end of the field. So yeah, I knew how you felt about it.
The group itself, Ryan Wingo joined late. It was Dalen McCutcheon was out there. I thought he actually looked pretty natural in catching punts, because I don't believe he caught a lot of punts in high school, because Parker Livingstone returned punts his junior year. Obviously, Jalen Lott was in the mix as well his junior year. So he looked natural. I thought Wingo was out there as well. And then Aaron Butler, I thought looked a little out of place receiving these punts. And we talked about it, and that's kind of upsetting because, look, we talked about what role Aaron Butler could fill in this team. And if it's not wide receiver immediately, punt return or kick return would be a spot that we'd say, hey, because of the athleticism, because of the frame, yeah, I could see that being a picture. He's going to have to turn it on for the rest of spring, because I was not impressed one bit with the punt return. And maybe it was just a windy day. I don't think it was, Jeff, but my memory sometimes fails me. Maybe that was just the case, or Bo Meester just kicks a really, really uncatchable punt.
Yeah. No, we talked about it. Kickoff really returner period. We're talking about kickoff return, or you're talking about punt return. Those are big question marks this season. Not really sure. DeAndre Moore is going to fill that role, but DeAndre Moore is not available during the spring. And who's going to step up to be the other kickoff returner or the backup kickoff returner? Who's your punt returner? Those are definitely questions that they got to figure out this spring.
Can I just state for the record again how utterly just head over heels, over the moon happy I am that Texas has successfully gotten back into the Australian punting pipeline? I
mean, it's a no-brainer. Like, why would you get away from it? Right? the numbers, the sheer numbers, the hit rate and the success rate is just way too high.
Yeah.
I agree with you, man. Yeah. All right, let's get to Colt. I hope you got permission for this. Says CJ Vogel going round 1.
Hey, actually, that might be Colt. Look, tip of the cap to my boy Colt, who 4 for 5 the other day with a couple doubles. So turning it on the diamond. He's back out there. Colt, good to see you, brother.
I like them doubles, Colt. Get that slug up. Get that slugging percentage up.
Thank you, Shane.
Like that. Appreciate that, Colt. So now CJ late third. I think CJ can go before that. At least top 50. All right, let's get back to the questions here. How about this one?
I'm a camp body. I know that much. I know that much about myself. I'm just a camp body.
Rick St. Charles here says, who has been a movable chess piece for Texas?
Jordan
really they hadn't had many of those. I remember when Tom Herman was here and he had the H in his offense. It was called the H position. And it literally, he told me it stood for hybrid. That's why he would get like Jake Smith and, those type of guys like Devin Duvernay. He wanted those types of players. They were a hybrid player, but he never weaponized them in a hybrid way, in my opinion.
Jordan Humphrey's as close as we got.
Malcolm Roach defensively.
Oh, defensively, I think you got some movable chess pieces. I think you might have a few. Janae Barron, you can throw him in there as a movable chess piece.
Look, as long as Malcolm Roach didn't play middle linebacker after the Maryland game, then I love Malcolm to death, but that was not his strong suit playing Mike Backer against Maryland.
I would say anybody playing Mike linebacker at 285 pounds, probably not. What you want when you see teams running jet sweeps over and over and over and over.
Again and again. Did they ever move Lil Jordan Humphrey? I thought moved around a little bit.
Yeah, he did.
But not enough. So I don't know if we've ever had a true one, Rex St. Charles. Not a real one. And it's an old school and kind of a modern concept. I mean, way back in the day, you saw guys do it, and now there is a movement, and I think it's more popularized by Kyle Shanahan and some of his, philosophy, because he wants multiple guys with multiplicity on the field at the same time. Now they've kind of changed because now, Debo's gone and they're changing up the recipe. McCaffrey's getting old and all that kind of stuff. It's not like it used to be, but it is in its apex, at its zenith. All right. It was difficult to defend because you had like 4 guys at the skill positions who could play multiple positions. So they were simultaneously like 4 different personnel groupings in one. All right. Because McCaffrey played running back and also played wide receiver. So did Debo. And then you can move, Kittle around. He can play H-back, fullback, tight end. And then, you had those different pieces you can move around. And Juszczyk, of course, also a movable chess piece. And Sark is a fan of Shanahan. So I've always said Sark don't want to major, and he ain't going to do what Shanahan did. Because, first of all, finding unique athletes like that is tough. Texas could do it, but it takes you really got to build your philosophy around that. And Sark ain't going to do that. He's not going to change who he is. But I think he wants to minor in it a little bit because he's starting to get some of these really freaky athletes. And Jaden Blue, honestly, could have been kind of one of those guys. Eric Metcalf back in the day was one of those guys, but the Texans didn't use him like that. He was running back here and then went to the league and then was a slot receiver, kind of guy in the league. And in the league, there was maybe a little bit of that. But I think Sark wants to minor in it a little bit. I think Michael Terry is part of that. And then some of these big athletes they're getting maybe part of that, like the tight end position specifically.
You know who the last real one was, Rod, probably for Texas?
Who that?
Ramont Taylor was really did not have. He might have been listed on the depth chart or on the roster at a position, but he didn't have a defined position.
That's a good point. That's a good one. Yeah, he was lined up in the slot a lot. I wish we had Pro Football Focus back then and show you like where he lined. Because you're right, though. I remember him they would put him in the slot, and sometimes he'd be in the backfield. That's a good one.
Yeah, David Thomas was a little bit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially early. I remember, as a true freshman, he was playing like some fullback.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the backfield a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You know what? It's messed up because we can think about more guys that probably should have been used that way that weren't, or like Blaine Irby could have been used that way had he not just.
Oh yeah, there are a couple of that. DJ could have been like that. Remember DJ Johnson? He could have been that. DJ Monroe probably should have been used more like that.
DJ.
Marquise Goodwin.
Oh, Marquise was nasty. Yeah, Marquise. Yeah, that's a good. Marquise should have. They should have did with Marquise more what. I mean, kind of how Isaiah. We talked about this with Isaiah Bunn. How Isaiah Bunn basically he's great as the extension of the run game, a long handoff from those wide receiver screens. But he's got, of course, top-notch, elite, world-class speed like a guy like Marquise Goodwin. And man, I feel like Texas didn't use him enough in the screen game. Now I feel like he should have been. I feel like it should be a lot of him just racing down the sideline, beating everybody to the corner. Now that we know, like he also had that world-class speed. I wish they'd have been doing miles per hour when he ran the 40.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what he got to. Because man, on the field, he looked just as fast as he ran. Like everybody knew he was going to run fast. And it was like, oh, he's going to run. We know he's going to run a 4.2 something. Because he looked that fast on the field. Man, he was just at the wrong time at Texas. Because that dude, if he had in a Sark system, that dude would have been easy. It had stuck into the first round easy.
You could have used him. You could have used him as a great way to insulate David Ash and or Case McCoy, whoever was playing quarterback. Because let's be honest, David Ash from a health standpoint, and Case, because you get to a point where you've just got there's just throws that Case can't make, but Case can get the ball out quick, can get the ball to the perimeter to Marquise Goodwin. And dude, you're gonna tell me like there's nobody in the country that's gonna get an angle on Marquise Goodwin. So I don't know why I'm thinking about the 2012 Texas and what could have been, but
no, you're right about that, dude. You're right, because it was during the offensive identity crisis at Texas. So you had all these really freaky weapons, and Texas couldn't utilize them, couldn't weaponize them because they didn't have an offensive identity at the time.
You had an offense where you had DJ Johnson, DJ Monroe, Marquise Goodwin, a young Jonathan Gray. Like you had all these guys. Jackson Shipley is another guy that could have done multiple things.
Tell you, dude.
You were a middle of the road type team.
To your point about Marquise Goodwin, this is how good he was running the football. He would have been great. He would have been a great Sark receiver because he was great on those end and arounds and those reversals. Remember those? He had 22 rushes in 2011, averaged 10 yards per rush. And he had 13 rushes in 2012 and averaged almost 11 yards per rush and had 3 touchdowns. He was great on those end and arounds. I remember that. And Texas wasn't even good. Imagine on a Sark ending around with Marquise Goodwin.
Yeah.
House call every time.
I just go back to that Alabama national championship game because Nick Saban doesn't call people by name, so call them by number. And he said the two guys that, especially once Colt went out, the two guys that made him most nervous were 26 and 84 was DJ Monroe and Marquise Goodwin because Nick Saban's talking about we didn't have the speed to keep up with those guys.
Yeah, already. I can't the angles. We ain't even got the angles on those guys, man. If they get loose, it's over. Yeah. And Texas couldn't. You're right. And Texas couldn't even utilize them or weaponize them. All right, we'll get to some more questions. Let me thank another one of our sponsors before we move on. Thank our friends over at South Point Dodge. That's right, folks. Now you can score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point over at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including a great selection of Ram 1500s, 2500s, and 3500s. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is your one-stop shop. And right now, our friends over at South Point Dodge have a great deal happening with over 50 Ram 2500s. That's right, folks. Over 50 Ram 2500s, all marked down with huge savings at South Point Dodge. So what are you waiting for? Get on over to South Point Dodge right now and check out that amazing inventory right off I-35 in South Austin, or you can go to southpointdodge.com and you can go there and make it easy on yourself and see all of their fantastic deals in their inventory there as well. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is your one-stop shop. If you're looking for a trade-in, looking for a new or a used car, friends over at South Point Dodge, trust me, folks, they can give you the deal of a lifetime. That's southpointdodge.com. Really appreciate them and their gracious sponsorship of our Wednesday night live stream. All right, let's get back to the questions here, gentlemen. How about this one from this was Cisco. Cisco says, Rod, did you get Akina his hat? I did not get Coach Akina. I ain't have an extra one with me, extra DBU hat. I did reunite with Coach Akina, though. I saw somebody else asking about that. I reunited with him, had a great conversation, got a chance to catch up, and I did tell him, I did tell Coach we're going to try to get a picture with all the DBs at one time, and when we get the picture, I'm gonna give him the hat. He's gonna wear the hat. We had a picture, and we're gonna try to get an all-time great DBU picture because I know most of the guys live here. A lot of the guys live here, but then we kind of wait till either at one point maybe preseason or maybe after the season, try to get everybody in the same spot. So
you ask him, hey, coach, you ever been on Vaughn Lane before with 20 other DBs?
Hey, I know. That'd be a great trip, man. It'd be a great trip. A DBU trip to a game. All right, that'd be good. And then at the end of the game, we take a picture with Coach Akita somewhere. That'd be pretty badass. And Vaughn Lane, great sponsor for it. I like that. CJ. That's great thinking, man. Great thinking. All right, let's get to it here. John here says, why is Trey Moore? She says, why is Trey Moore moving to linebacker? Is he too small for NFL edge? This is a good conversation to have because I'm not sure if the reports are that he's moving or is he just cross-training?
Cross-training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, he's same height, same weight. He's got 8 pounds on Colin Simmons, but they're both listed at 6'3". So do that. Use with that as you'd like. But my thinking is here, you won't Colin Simmons on the field no matter what.
Yep.
You'd like to have a Trey Moore on the field no matter what. But in those third and mediums, can you get away with a team that can run the football on the edges with two guys that are 6'3", 240?
That's a good point.
I'd like to think that they'd like to have an Ethan Burke or a Lance Jackson or Colton Vasek, one of those longer-limbed, bigger body guys that are pushing about 260, 265 to get out there and at least plant one of those edges, right? So if you're able to do just that with one of the edges that we talked about previously, while keeping an Anthony Hill, a Brad Spence, or Trey Moore on the field, you got to figure out ways to do just that. Because I know Texas fans know, there's no way Colin Simmons is coming off the field on a third down at all this year. So that's my thing is he's going to see a lot more time at edge than linebacker. But if there's packages that you could throw him at specifically for the sense of getting another edge rusher on the field, I think you would absolutely have to deploy those or at least practice them.
Yeah, we talked about it, Rod. You could have 3 linebackers on the field, but I was thinking about Leonga Lafau in that mix, but and if your 3 linebackers on a given snap are Anthony Hill, Brad Spence, and Trey Moore, depending on who you got up front, your pressure can come from anywhere on one of those first levels.
Yep.
So it's just, like I said, man, this is what has me thankful for Alan Clark coming to coach the edges, because this is the perfect season for PK to be able to kind of take a step back, take more of a macro view of it, and be like, all right, I got all these pieces. How can I make it all work? Not having to worry about coaching the edges. I can just kind of get back and play observer and then go get in the lab and figure out how we're going to make all this work.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I've been saying for a while, I think that they want to go to more, cross-training and more position flex with guys, even if it's just situationally or if it's matchup based, right? It could be a week-to-week thing, or it could just be, hey, situationally, NASCAR package, bump Barron Sherrill inside so he can play multiple shades. So I think they want D linemen that can play multiple shades. All right, look at these freaky guys they're recruiting, Justice Terry's of the world. Got Lance Jackson, these guys, like, man, that guy can play multiple shades up front. I think the linebackers that they're looking at, I think these guys are freaky. Anthony Hill's a guy that also is one of your best pass rushers. You can put him on the edge, but he can play, off-ball Mike linebacker, no doubt about that too. So, and I think Trey Moore, because of his body type, I think they're looking at him as a guy because, he in a certain area, he can cover it as a linebacker. You don't give him too much space to cover, he'll be fine. He won't be too much of a fish out of water. Now, don't be unrealistic. All right, you want to make sure you're pragmatic about it. You don't want him covering, tight ends deep down the seam or anything like that necessarily. But if you got him just covering a short area as a linebacker, I think he can handle that. But I also, to Jeff's point, if you give him snaps at linebacker, and they moved him around a little bit last year, like there were times last year based on the formation that he ended up in a linebacker role, dropping back, standing up. But if you do that more intentionally and in a purposeful fashion, teams now have to account for it and get a game plan for it.
Yeah.
Damn. And like Jeff says, oh man, they got those 3 guys on the field at one time. What if they drop him at linebacker? What do we need to be ready for? What if, the linebackers basically replace him on the edge and they come in a simulated pressure, all those types of things. And so I think not only do you have your opponent chasing ghosts, but I think they want at every level of the defense, they want guys that can play multiple positions. And they do have it. I mean, look at it. They have that right now. Look at the secondary with Jelani McDonald being that guy. We keep talking about all these other DBs, Wardell Mack and different players, Jay Barron, of course, Jalen Gilbo, who are playing multiple positions. That is not a coincidence, and it's not an accident. They're cross-training guys because they want position flex. It gives them more solutions, and it offers them a chance to try to get all the best players on the field at one time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and the second is like they can get our best 5 guys on the field. We just got to move this guy around and move that guy around, and we'll get our best 5 guys out there. The same reason Kyle Flood does it on the offensive line. I'm gonna try to get my best 5 out there if I can, and I think that's another opportunity that position flexibility gives you.
I think for Trey too, it helps his NFL stock too, because in the right system, could somebody draft him and be like, yeah, he could play Sam linebacker for us. Mm-hmm. Depending on it, because I don't know if you guys remember, but like when Brian Arakpo went to the league, that's Washington drafted him. They ran a 4.3, and they're like, no, in our system, he's the perfect Sam linebacker.
Yes,
I was like, I don't know if that makes sense, but then you watch it and you're like, oh, okay, how based on how they use him,
exactly,
makes sense. So.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. All right, thank you for that, John. Getting back to it, Jordan here says, who do you guys see being running back 1 this year? Has Wisner not proved himself? All right. Well, you still got the injury to Baxter to consider, but who's your running back 1?
I still think it's CJ Baxter if and when he's healthy. Again, I know this conversation is really kind of spurred recently. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why. As he inches back, look, let's not forget this is the guy that beat out Jonathan Brooks for that first snap in 2023, right? Now, would he have won that job for the duration of the season? You could debate that, right? He was just a freshman, and Jonathan Brooks would have won the Doak Walker in my eyes. But point being, there's enough proven in that short amount of time to trust him with those first snaps. Now, did he have the best freshman year? Maybe not. It was about 4.8, 5 yards a carry. I wouldn't say that's terrible, but was that the 5-star that you were hoping for? Again, up for debate. Now coming off the ACL, what does he look like? How up to speed is he? How much does he trust the knee? Can he read a brand new front line, right? Because he's never run behind a NATO. He's never run behind a Cole Hudson at center. Is that going to be too much to learn and too much to quickly adapt for? We'll have to wait and see in fall camp. But again, let's not forget this is the highest rated guy on the roster, and he provides a body that no other running back on the roster brings as well. So yeah, if Trey Wisner is my floor as a running back in this room, I think you feel great about your room because we saw exactly what he could bring. 1,000 yards on the season, very slippery, but also very physical with the way that he runs. I always applaud Trey Wisner for this. It felt like, and I didn't want to do this because I said it last year, Rodney, I remember ending the stream and just being like, damn, I really did do that. But he had some Bijan in him in the sense that first guy never brought him down. And I remember sitting there saying, wait a minute. Bijan was the best running back in all of college football. And is that what I'm doing right now? And the more that you watch Trey between the tackles, the more that you see he just gets skinny, right? He gets small, and it's very difficult for him to be brought down by one guy immediately. And I've always applauded Trey for that, but I have to imagine that if CJ Baxter is fully healthy, he's your guy.
Yep. I like that. It makes you disability in the backfield. Yeah.
Yeah. I blame myself still for CJ Baxter's injury because when the college football game came out, I won a Texas OU game by spamming the counterplay with CJ Baxter. So the football gods punished CJ for my misuse of spamming counterplays. So that was my fault. But Rod, I think Trey Wisner is really, really close to replacing your former teammate Hodges Mitchell as the most underappreciated 1,000-yard rusher in the history of the program. Like, are we just gonna forget that Trey Wisner had 1,000 yards last year, and basically carried you to the finish line to win the A&M game? Like
30 rushes.
We're just gonna forget that. I'm not gonna forget that. I don't like assuming that, like, yeah, I'm excited that CJ Baxter's coming back. I'm excited about Christian Clark's progress. You know what else I'm excited? I'm excited the fact that Trey Wisner can get better, that he can add some armor on his body and be ready to rock and roll. Now, is he going to have another 1,000-yard season? I don't know, but I'm not going to cast a 1,000-yard back aside, because there was a stretch at Texas where you were thirsting for a 1,000-yard runner. Now you've got one. I'm not gonna discard Trey Wisner. There was a lot of disrespect, right? Well, I don't want to say disrespect, but just not enough respect put on Hodges Mitchell's name back in the day, and I don't sense that there's a ton of respect being put on Trey Wisner's name right now.
If there's one thing about Trey that might be a little cautionary for me, look, 194 is what he's weighing right now. Obviously, I think it was Tashard Choice who told us that he was around 202, 203 for those bowl games in Atlanta. 194, I don't know if that's where you want him again for next year. So we'll see.
Man, we've had more random references from old school Longhorns on the offensive side of the ball, and the Hodges Mitchell reference is another good one. Hodges Mitchell, 1,300 rushing yards in 1999.
Telling you, man.
Along with 300 yards receiving too, and in 2000 he had over 1,100 rushing yards and over 380 receiving yards. Dude, he was a workhorse. And he was small. Hodges was probably 5'7". Yeah. I was like, Rod B is taller than Hodges Mitchell, clearly. And I would think, yeah, about 5'7".
And man, you talk about, I know Fozzie's injury is up there in terms of the most just heartbreaking ones I've seen in my time following the program. I damn near cried when Hodges Mitchell blew his knee out in that Holiday Bowl. Yep. That ended his career. He didn't get it.
Was it Baum? Is it Rashad Bauman?
Bauman. Yep.
Yeah, the DB. I remember it too. I remember watching it. Like, I saw it and I was like, I can't believe it. Because that dude definitely would have had a shot. He definitely would have got to get into a camp or something. There's no doubt.
It's a miracle that Fozzie Whitaker played in the league at all, let alone as long as he did after tearing it up on that god awful turf in
Missouri. Yeah. I thought that Mac brought that up too. That's what these Mac he's still upset about that.
He should be. Everybody should still be pissed about that. Man, the Hodges Mitchell one was the one that watching it, I'm like, man, I think I just saw Hodges Mitchell's football career end.
It was. Yep.
It did.
It was on that day. Like I said, I remember the player and everything. I'm old. My CTE kicks in. I don't remember a damn thing. I remember that play vividly. Because as you pointed out, it was the end of my boy's career. I could see it. I was like, that's it. Ain't no way he's coming back from that. Unfortunately, he didn't. But Hodges is doing well, and doing better. Lives in Austin. Love him, man. Hodges Mitchell. All right, let's get back to the questions here. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can before we get done. How about this one from Todd? He says, anything new on 2026 recruiting? Jim, anything? Any buzz? Any nuggets? Anything?
Got a visit weekend. Got a visit coming up this week. This is one of the benefits to having Texas relays when you do and having it around spring ball is a lot of guys are going to come into town not to compete. Rod, you know how it is. Guys just want to come into Austin just for the relays weekend. So why not have a Saturday practice and let guys come up and hang out for a little bit?
It's a good idea. Yep.
Yeah. I know Jalen Lott will be down here for the Texas relays. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but it's raining pretty heavy right outside of my house. And I live right down the street from the dish. So I know that's happening at Texas relays essentially. But Jalen Lott expected to make it back down. We'll see what other names filter in as well from the 26 class. I will say that Texas offered a 2026 Florida cornerback yesterday committed to Michigan. So that'll be worth monitoring moving forward as well. But other than that, until these guys get back on campus, it's going to be a little while until you start to hear and see more and more of movement in their recruitments.
Oh, all right. We got a super chat from Justin. Justin, thank you for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Says, what are y'all going to be focused on at tomorrow's media window? Oh, this is good. What do we get at the media window? Are you going to address the media?
If we get a viewing window, CJ, don't be pessimistic. That glass is half full right now. CJ, don't look at it.
How long was the first media window?
It was a good 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Not
good.
bad. I didn't get to see any of the offensive line in the first window. So y'all know me when I go to those windows. Rod, you know me long enough. I go up on the hill with the offensive line. That's where I go. So that's if we get to watch a little bit of practice tomorrow, that's where I'll be.
That's good because I don't even speak O-line. I need somebody that speaks O-line like Jeff. It's a whole different language.
I'm a sick puppy that be like, oh, I want to watch Arch throw it. I'm like, no, I want to go watch Al Flood putting guys on the Crowler sled. Let me.
No, you know, I like that. We were doing the third and Longhorn, and then they were doing the D-line, like the D-line drills. And then Alex Okafor gets up. He's like, they're doing D-line drills? And he sprints over there. He just leaves us in the middle of the show. He's like, I got to go see these D-line drills, man. I'm like, what? I was like,
they were getting after it, Rod.
No, he really, you know what I'm saying? Linemen, Jeff, they just like to watch other linemen get after it, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. I'll be looking at the wide receivers. I am a quarterback wide receiver sicko. That's where I can't relate to the big boys. I'll never be 6 foot. I'll never be 6'5". You know, moving bodies in the interior. That's not what I've ever done. So I go watch the guys on air because that's where I like to envision myself throwing and catching passes. But no, that more so than that, who of these youngsters start to stand out? You know, we talked about Michael Terry earlier. We've talked about Jamie French. I thought Dalen McCutcheon had a very smooth day one in terms of getting in and out of breaks. Does that continue? We know that he's going to have a bountiful amount of opportunity this year with no DeAndre Moore. Does he jump Aaron Butler? We'll see. But I'm going to be watching those guys and really more so the demeanor of a Chris Jackson and Steve Sarkisian when balls and routes are going their direction. You know, is it okay, you know, good job, or is it, oh, Jesus, we got to work more, you know? So We'll see.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, a guy that I didn't probably give enough props to because I was going back today and looking at some of the clips on my phone that I've shot because Texas only lets you post so many online. So I only have 2 clips floating out there. But I didn't give enough props to Jamie French.
Okay.
As far as the newcomers on day one. So talk about a guy that just kind of he's a little springy. I'm digging early returns for me, very early returns and limited viewing of Jamie French. I'm a fan.
Yep. I want to go watch the young wideouts too. A lot of reps available there. So I'm probably going to watch the young wideouts. Got to go see the DBs, of course. I'm going to go see Coach Aquino, see what they're doing with these young bucks. I got to go watch the corners. Who's leading the drills? Who led the drills? Can y'all tell me who was leading the drills?
So
y'all watched?
I don't know if y'all did this, Rod, back in the day, or if this has been a common thing at Texas, but it looked to me like it started off as after they went through pursuit, DBs went through a little bit of a group stations rotation, you know. So Aquina had one where he was just firing Randy Johnson fastballs at guys coming downhill. Orfe had one. Kenoto Hudson had one. It's all working different things. One was a DB ladder, you know, working along the sideline. The other one is backpedaling, getting in and out of your breaks. And, of course, I think the other one was basically just dodgeball practice with Aquina in the middle of the field. But it was interesting because – and I mentioned this earlier on Twitter, and I've talked with Bobby as well. It feels like these guys are getting basically a private lesson with each coach. And I say that because I feel like obviously with the NCAA rule change, there are more coaches out on the field than ever before, which means you can break guys up into groups of 2, 3, or 4 and say, all right, instead of being on a line for 8 people, let me work with you hands-on for X, Y, and Z. And I saw that time and time again on Tuesday, whether it be PK talking with Colin Simmons so much that he was not the first guy out to the pursuit drills, but just working hand placement. I saw Kenny Baker getting into it with Alex January and Hero Canoe, just teaching them different hands and foot placements. And Jamie French talking with Chris Jackson. You know, it's just little things like that carry over and I think make these 15 practices so much more meaningful.
Wow. I mean, Sark said that's what he was going to do. That emphasis on teaching, emphasis on development and the fundamentals with all these new faces, coaches and players. So really interesting that you noticed that right off the bat. Good observation there, CJ. All right, let's before we move on, let's thank another one of our sponsors, our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. Did you know the most awarded wine in Texas is actually the vineyard closest to Austin? That's right, folks. Flat Creek Estate Winery, just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award this year for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Super Texan is now available at your local Specs. They also have a display at the local Central Market that I shop at too. So I'm glad the good word is getting out about the great wines over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. But not only do they produce some of the best premium wines on the market, love the Super Texan, but also rosé is great and refreshing, and so is the Pinot Grigio. They also produce premium wines. They're at a gorgeous venue, a fantastic venue. I've actually got a chance to take a tour of the Flat Creek Estate Winery, and folks, it is amazing. And you can they have barbecues and wine tastings and tours every single weekend. You also can book it for any special occasion that you may have. I actually know a member of the Owen, Texas football family. They got engaged out there at Flat Creek Estate Winery. So no matter how special the occasion may be, they can accommodate you at Flat Creek Estate Winery. It's perfect for a date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with your significant other. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. All right, let's get back to the questions. MJF says, Rod, is that your UT diploma in the background? What was your? Yep, that is the UT diploma. Yep, got it back from mom. Mom had it forever. I got it back probably maybe like 3 years ago. I just got the diploma back. So mom had it for. She was like, you can have it back now. She had it on her wall. And I majored in I was an education major. Specifically education and youth and community studies was my like the field that I was in, but I was education. It is College of Education, basically. So yeah, you don't want me. I was trying to go into coaching. I thought I may go into coaching. Still, who knows? May go into coaching, but education was my field. That was my passion, if you will. Thank you, MJF. Also, MJF says, with the new O-line, will we see more relocated pockets, bootleg waggles, etc.? I think because Arch is a big part of it. The O-line will be a big part of it too, but MJF, I think it's Arch and his mobility. That's why you're going to move the pocket more. I agree with you, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you, MJF. I appreciate that. How about this one from James? What are you guys hearing on Justice Terry in spring practice?
He got a little dinged up, a little hammy strain to start practice one, but I know in winter conditioning, everything was a professional approach. A guy that was in and out, really cares about rehabilitation, taking care of his body, and making sure that each practice day means something. So great start for the 5-star out of Georgia.
I said it before, man, just based on what we heard through winter conditioning and even when he got to Texas during the bowl practices, one thing I always worry about with big guys, how important is football to them? Or are they just did they just get thrown into football because, they were the big kid in school and, hey, this is my pathway to changing my life or whatever. No, Justice Terry cares about football. He's invested. So that question was answered pretty quick.
Yep. Good stuff there, guys. It's 420 somewhere. Thank you for the super chat. It's 420 somewhere. Says Sarkis mentioned he wants to run it more like an OTA in the spring. What is that setup like, and how is it different from traditional spring practices? Thank you very much. It's 420 somewhere. CJ, you were just talking about it. Actually, made a very good observation of how it's more of a teaching, more of a clinical approach to the practices.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be less physical, right? You don't want these guys butting heads as often as they have in previous springs because of how many games they play and how recently these games took place last year. So for Texas, with as many new faces that are on the campus, as many new coaches that are now living in Austin, I think this is a great opportunity for them to all kind of learn together with one another. And again, there's a lot of youth on this roster. You start talking about some of the best players that Texas will deploy next year. None of them will include a Jake Majors, a Vernon Broughton, and Alfred Collins, right? A Jade Barron, guys who have been around the system for years and years and years and years. You're going to need this time specifically to teach them the ins and outs, the little tricks and tips that make them stand out. So I'm all for it, and I think it's going to continue to be hands-on, not as physical. Obviously they got to figure out who can hit, who can tackle, etc. But more teaching, more tutelage, and I think that's going to pay off towards the end of fall camp when you start transitioning end of spring camp as you start transitioning into fall camp.
You go to a practice the last couple of years, and it's been like clockwork. Like everybody knew, because you had guys that had been with Sark from day one for multiple years, and it's like boom. Rod, you've been at that practice when you get to that team you played on as a senior. That was a veteran team. You guys didn't need to practice script. Everybody knew how it was going. That's how it's been. And there's a level of expectations, and you can see a different demeanor from Sark. Even the little sample we got on day one. Not to say that the standard has dropped, but I think he's a little more willing to forgive some of the minor mistakes that otherwise he would have been down guys' throats for making those mistakes before. So I think it's early on, the vibe is it's more, to piggyback off what CJ was saying, it's more individual periods and maybe like group stuff where the whole secondary is together or defensive line and linebackers are together, and less like team simulated situational stuff. So a lot more individual and kind of group stuff as opposed to just, hey, let's line up and do 7-on-7 and Pascal and team and all that stuff.
Yep. And and Sark said, one of the big reasons why we don't know going forward how he's going to have his spring structured, but all the new faces, just wants them to be well adapted. By the time they hit training camp, they can be running. They can just hit the ground running, because the coaches, to Jeff's point, they also don't. A lot of these guys don't know how the practice is supposed to go either. We're kind of letting them get acclimated to it. Good point. Is 420 somewhere. We appreciate that. A couple of more questions here. I know we're approaching the end of the live stream. Zane says, why in the world did they move Niblett to DB when wide receiver is so thin?
Hopefully to get that speed on the field somewhere. And I think it could be a little telling that with as thin and as much that we've talked about this wide receiving position not having answers, and that move still happened to kind of give an idea of where he was in that room previously. So hopefully, again, somewhere in that secondary, you'll see Ryan Niblett start to, kind of take those leaps to getting on the field more consistently.
All right. Thank you, Zane, for that question. Yeah, I thought even he may be a guy that tries to get on the field with a kick return, considering they don't know who the kick returners are either.
Look, at this point, if you're on scholarship, if that's your way to contribute, then that's how you contribute.
Yeah, like find a role somewhere. He's trying to do that, obviously. That's why he's moving positions. So I'm not saying that for him. I thought you'd have seen him come up in other places as well, though. Thank you for that question. Let's thank our final sponsor of the evening, our friends over at Von Lane. A lot of you out there have tried flying to the major cities in Texas, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. You've tried driving to those major cities as well. And now it's time for you to upgrade to Von Lane, the smarter way to travel between major Texas cities. And for our out-of-state listeners, Von Lane also connects Nashville, Memphis, and Atlanta. But getting back to the great state of Texas, let's face it, flying is a hassle. You got security lines, packed gates, delayed flights, the ridiculous prices of airport food and snacks, all for what? An hour flight, hour round trip flight. That can be a bit of a stressful situation for anybody, and it's totally not worth it. All right, if you're driving, it isn't much better. You got to deal with traffic. You got to deal with the lost productivity, emails piling up, calls going unanswered, work left undone, all for what? That wasted day of productivity, trying to get to and from the major cities in Texas. Von Lane changes everything. It's luxury regional bus travel, what some call a private jet on planes, private jet on wheels. I've actually taken it myself to Houston and to DFW. You can sink into a plush leather seat with a leg rest. You can stay connected with complimentary Wi-Fi, enjoy complimentary snacks as well, and drinks on every trip. Plus, they have delicious meals on select departures. And if you need to freshen up, they even have hot towel service along with eye masks and pillows and blankets to keep you cozy. The Von Lane team takes care of every detail so you can sit back, unwind, and relax and enjoy the most comfortable travel experience on the road today. Now, business travelers, you can recapture lost productivity. Leisure travelers, you can just sit back, relax, and get pampered by the Von Lane staff. And if you're planning a special trip, football game, concert, bachelor party, bachelorette party, guys or gals trip, you can charter your own Von Lane coach for the ultimate group experience. My man CJ even mentioned the DBU should do that for the DBU reunion at Texas. Von Lane, first class travel without the hassle. See for yourself. Visit vonlane.com. That's VONLANE.com and use the promo code OTF25. That's OTF25 for $20 off your first trip with Von Lane All right. Last question here. Farja says, when is Rod going to get Kyle Shanahan on OTF? I don't know. I got to ask him, but he probably won't come on. Probably won't come on. Chris Sims is more likely, though. I will say that that's one I think I can try to fact because he's a member of the media now. So he does stuff like that all the time. That actually is one that I'm going to work on for you guys. Kyle Shanahan, probably a little unrealistic for me right now. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Honest, Rod, I would want to sit in on that interview, but Chris Sims does not need me, verbally ass whipping him about random ass games. So I'll just sit it out.
No, man, no, trust me. He's very open about his experiences at the NFL level and the college level. So I can't wait to actually, it might be a two-parter, man. That might be a long, drawn-out one. All right. Thank you guys for the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to each and every one of them. Tried to get to most of them. But if we missed any of your questions, please direct them to the guys at Coffee and Football tomorrow. That'll be starting up bright and early at 8:15 a.m. Also, tomorrow, you have the winning drive. That'll be with myself, CJ Vogel, and the coach, Bob Shipley. And that'll be around 3:15. So if we missed your questions, you can direct them to us or the guys at Coffee and Football. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Von Lane, vonlane.com. Remember, use that code OTF25. You'll get $20 off your first trip with Von Lane. Thank you to South Point Dodge, southpointdodge.com. Thank you to Flat Creek Estate Winery as well, flatcreekestate.com. Really appreciate them. And Bluebird Organizing, bluebirdorganizing.net. Thank you very much to them for being sponsors of our Wednesday night live stream. Thank you, Jeff, for all of the nuggets. Thank you, CJ, for the expertise. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes. He is the real MVP. Thanks to you guys out there for watching and listening. And until next time, for Jeff and for CJ and for Matthew, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Let's look 'em horns.